Our story today is Mr. Jelly and His Small Friend by Roger Hargreaves. Mr. Jelly was frightened of everything. In fact, he was terribly frightened of everything. The slightest sound would send him running to his bed, shaking and trembling, just like a jelly. Poor Mr. Jelly. Look at him under the bed. Knock, knock. The terrible sound frightened Mr. Jelly out of his wits. And again, knock, knock. Quivering with fear, Mr. Jelly started opening all the bolts and locks on the doors. It took him quite a while, and for all the time he muttered to himself, "Oh my goodness me, whatever could it be? Robbers? Thieves? Oh, calamity!" Look, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 locks. Oh, poor Mr. Jelly. Finally, he opened the last lock, and there on his doorstep stood little Miss Tiny. "Hello, Mr. Jelly," she began. "I was just passing and thought you might like to come with me into the forest to collect strawberries." "The forest?" exclaimed Mr. Jelly. "Oh, goodness me, no! Who knows what we would find? Snakes, bears, lions? Oh, calamity! But after your walk, do come back and have lunch with me." So off she went alone. It was a long time after lunchtime, and Mr. Jelly was starting to get very worried indeed. Perhaps little Miss Tiny was lost in the forest. What could he do? What should he do? Oh, he's under the table. Mr. Jelly gathered together all his courage, and shaking and trembling, he stepped out of his house and into the forest to look for his little friend. "Little Miss Tiny," he called, his teeth chattering with fear. The only reply was the wind in the trees, and scared out of his wits, Mr. Jelly ran all the way back to his house. Ooh. And he grabbed his telephone. "Hello, Mr. Rush," he said. I need your help to find little Miss Tiny. I'm afraid she is lost in the forest. She could have fallen into the river, or she could have been eaten by wolves or dragons. Oh, calamity!" 1 minute later, Mr. Rush arrived at Mr. Jelly's house. Ding dong! Another minute later, Mr. Rush left and disappeared into the forest, running at full speed. "Little Miss Tiny, where are you?" he called. "I don't have any time to lose. I'm in a terrible hurry." But, not finding her, he rushed away again. Some time later, little Miss Contrary called on Mr. Jelly. She had heard that little Miss Tiny was missing. "Goodbye," said Miss Contrary. "I've come not to help." Mr. Jelly was rather frightened and very confused, but he let her in. Little Miss Contrary opened the wardrobe door and looked through a pile of sheets and towels. "Ah, just as I thought," she said. "Little Miss Tiny isn't there. Hello!" And off she went. How very strange, thought Mr. Jelly, shaking all over. Now night was falling, and large black clouds were gathering in the sky. It looked like a big storm was coming. Again, gathering together all his courage, Mr. Jelly ventured back into the forest. There he met Mr. Bounce. "You're my last hope," stammered Mr. Jelly. "You must help me find little Miss Tiny before it's too late." And he hurried back to his house as fast as his shaking legs would carry him. Oh dear. Boing, boing, boing. Mr. Bounce bounced higher and higher, looking for little Miss Tiny. But no matter how high he bounced, he could not see her. Suddenly the sky was lit up with lightning, and Mr. Jelly's house shook to the sound of thunder. He couldn't leave Little Miss Tiny alone in the storm. So, shaking with fright at each clap of thunder, he threw himself out into the dark, stormy night. There he goes. Ooh. "Help! Help!" came a voice from the forest. "Do you think it was Little Miss Tiny?" No, not at all. It was Mr. Jelly, who had seen a worm. The little yellow worm. At the sound of his shouts, Little Miss Tiny came running to help. "Mr. Jelly," she exclaimed, "what on earth are you doing in the forest in the storm? You must be scared out of your wits. Let me take you home, and I'll tell you all about the lovely day I've had." Back at Mr. Jelly's house, they were celebrating with a large strawberry cake covered in cream, when boing, splat! Mr. Bounce bounced right into the house and landed on top of the cake. "Oh, calamity!" shouted Mr. Jelly. "What will become of us? The sun has fallen from the sky." And with another rather sticky splat, he fainted. The end.